Good morning and welcome to the Wavy Digital Desk. I'm your host, Sarah Good. Today we're going to be speaking about an important week. It is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. You may have heard it in your own community. Today we're going to be focusing on the community in Hampton. Now there's events that are taking place across Hampton roads, so this is just one of the cities. Be sure to head to wavy.com to find out more about your city. But I think these resources and these events happening this week are very important to the community as a whole. And we have today Tyrone George with us from the Hampton Commonwealth Attorney's Office and Victim Services Unit. He's a violent crime specialist, and he's going to sort of tell us about how the week has been, the events going on, as well as the resources available. I'm going to bring him on now. Tyrone, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So just tell me a little bit about your role as a victim crime specialist, or violent crime specialist, excuse me.
So I'm a violent crime specialist in the Hampton Victim Services Unit. We are what we call a full service office, and so we have different advocates for different types of crime. My crimes that I generally work, cases that I work on, crimes against persons. They can include gang-related cases, gun-related cases, and drug-related cases. But we're a full-service office, so we service everything from victims of crime, from everything from shoplifting to sex trafficking and everything in between.
And I guess one of the big questions and why this Awareness Week is so important is that process after, a crime takes place is probably, and I imagine, so traumatizing for the person that to know what resources are available is critical. Can you just talk about that piece of it, just that person's experience, trying to sort of follow the days after?
Definitely. So you pinpointed it. We meet people in some of their most vulnerable states. Often before they get to court, many times in the aftermath of their serious victimization. So we're doing everything inside of the court, from attending attorney meetings, advocating for victims of crime, providing referrals that may potentially to counseling or housing or even financial resources, assisting them with filling out paperwork and connecting them with other professionals. And then we walk with them through every stage of the court process. So that's as early as the bond hearings and arraignments, all the way through trial, and then hopefully through conviction and sentencing.
Wow, so that's a really close bond, I imagine, that you form with some of these people.
Absolutely. And the advocates, they are very good at being intentional. Again, we're meeting people at fragile spaces. So, trying to be the glue, if you will. Court, if we're honest or candid, is not necessarily a restorative place. Most people are not familiar with the process. And so there's a little bit of unfamiliarity with that in the court process. So we try to clear up those things, but then also addressing the person and not just the crime or the crime victimization. And so meeting them where they're at. And so each advocate with the victims that they work with, it's unique, but we definitely try to meet them where their needs are and assist them as much as possible.
And just tell me a little bit about this week, and then we can jump into more resources. But, this week started with a breakfast with community leaders, I believe. Can you just tell us, how that event went?
It was an overwhelming response. We've seen a number of stakeholders and leaders from our community. Our mayor was there, members of city council, and members of our school board, as well as other professionals from nonprofits and other agencies that we partner with throughout the city. They showed up, let us know that they're concerned and they care about the crime and the victims that are happening in our community. And then also we worked on partnerships and trying to be the glue, some of the things that we don't always do the best, improving some of the things that we don't do as well, and then trying to reinforce some of the bonds that are already existing.
And how important is that connection, either for, advocates, for survivors, for, city officials? How important is that bond and that connection to, I guess, be maybe transparent as possible or as comfortable as possible?
Incredibly important. There are so many moving parts behind the scenes that as public servants that the public isn't always privy to, but as much communication and transparency and cohesiveness as possible really makes it work for the benefit of our communities and assisting crime victim rights.
And I imagine that having a breakfast like this is an opportunity to connect when it isn't, as you said, exactly following a crime while you're in court, but a separated event really to have that connection and to maybe understand, what's happening in the community.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you mentioned, as far as the crime that goes on in the community, we definitely want to pinpoint things during Crime Victim Rights Week. We want to let them know that we care about them, that there's resources out there for them. Obviously, there's a great need in our community. We can't do everything right. We don't do everything perfectly, but we want to know, even with the public connection, we want to let them know that we're there. We hear them. There are resources out there, and so National Crime Victims Rights Week allows us to get out of our offices, get out of the courtroom, and really connect with the public and see what address the needs that's there, and then find out what we can do better.
And is there anything in conversation that you've had this week that's really stood out to you, whether an observation or just something that you've heard repeated?
I think the public, uh, there's been a number of events that we've had through Crime Victims' Rights Week. I know we're going to unpack some of that, but the public has definitely responded to us well and let us know, that they want to see us more. They want to have more information, more transparency, and definitely just know some of the moving parts behind the scenes. So, if anything, kind of peel back the curtain from the Wizard of Oz and try to let people know what we do, who we are, and how we can assist them, because I think there's a great need in our community.
And there was a Lighting the Way to Healing event that took place last night. Can you tell us a little bit about how that went?
I think if, for anyone that was there, I think they would say it was overwhelming. We had several members of the community that came out and spoke. We had a young lady who was a survivor of sexual assault, and she came out and spoke, talked about her victimization, and then provided us with some hope, if you will, through her art and her own presentation. We also had a member that was another victim of crime, and they came out and they read the names of the homicide victims from April 2023 to this year. And again, we had a moment of silence for them as well, just to represent the we see the hurt that's there. We have also had members of the homicide support group that we have, and they came out. They stood in the gap really, and were representative of their loved ones that were lost, and really were a reminder for us of the work that we have to do and the importance of the work that needs to be done.
I'm sure that was an emotional moment reading all those names, off that list from last April. What was the reaction in the room? Was it comforting to one another? Was it a moment of, I guess, peace and prayer? I mean, just tell us a little bit about, how everyone came together.
I think it was a mix of emotions, just because, we were referring to people who were lost in our community. We had individuals there who were actively have cases that our office is prosecuting. We had professionals there that that do the work day in and day out. And so, for some, it was a relief because they felt like they were represented. And then for others, I think it was just an outpour, a mixture of emotions, just because, when you're in the thick of it and in the throes of, of hurt and injury and loss, I think just a mix of emotion that was there. But I think for all parties, I think I can say that we were all happy to be there. Maybe not for the same reasons, but we were all happy to be there because we know that there's a lot of work to be done, and we know that the work is getting done.
And do you think part of that healing started, from that acknowledgement of just what's happened in the past year and maybe talking about some of these events?
Definitely, I think that's the beginning of the healing process. It's a long process, but I think for some that are in there, some are in the middle, some are in the beginning, but we're all in the process of healing.
And I know it is more focused on the healing event. I know that candles were provided or actually maybe last night actually ended up getting moved. Is that correct, into the church or?
Right. We moved to First Baptist Church, which is
Mhm.
also the location of our event tonight. First Baptist Church accommodated us because it started to look like we were going to have some inclement weather, and we wanted to accommodate our guests.
And, I think in that environment too, being inside a church versus a park, did that change maybe the emotion of the moment? Do you think that was a nice community moment to be able to be together?
I think so. It's a historic assembly in our city, and I think if anything, it added to uh, the heartfelt part of the event, and really added more sincerity to it, if anything.
And were any conversations brought up after the event? Things that maybe people wanted more of? Did they want more healing events to take place in the city maybe throughout the year? Was there any conversation like that taking place?
Yeah, so we did get a number of individuals, families who gave us some feedback. They wanted this, like I said, they wanted to see us more often, and then additionally, they like events like that. So this again, we have Victims' Rights Week annually, but we've had a number of events throughout the year. We do events for domestic violence awareness month. We do events for homicide survivor awareness, and then for child abuse and some other events throughout the year. So we are out in the communities, not as much as we'd like to be. And of course, we wish that there was not any victimization of crime, but we are trying to touch the people. And I think the simplest way, we'll have some contact information on the screen, but if they reach out to us, if we're available, we'll definitely try to show up.
Absolutely. And, just to jump off what you just said there, if you're on wavy.com, there's resource links throughout the article. If you're on Facebook and YouTube, that link is also there with resource links to the event tonight and also to Victim Services Unit, so you can get directly in touch and find out more. I did want to say, tonight wraps up this week of events for you all with Surviving the Edge. Can you tell us about what that performance is?
I think anyone who's coming out to the play tonight is in for a treat. The writer and director is St Clair, and she has created a wonderful production with a phenomenal cast of individuals who are going to unpack some of the challenges that victims of crime experience. She's going to talk about our theme, which is for hope and giving resources for individuals. And so you'll be able to see that unpacked in a theatrical form. And I think that anybody who comes out, they'll be able to know the work we do, the challenges that a victim of a crime has, and then the options and hopes for survivors.
And that's interesting too, because you never know what's going to reach people, right? So a performance and maybe this artistic sort of messaging might reach somebody in a different way.
I definitely agree. I think that, seeing is believing, as the phrase goes. And I think, for those, we all come to life through different ways and different avenues. But I think that when a person is a victim of a crime, when you can see that, when you can experience it, it's one experience. But then as well, just having the empathy for others. And so I think that the theatrical performance that Ms. St. Clair has put together and our office is sponsoring, you'll be able to have see what others are going through and be able to extend that empathy. So even if it's not you who is experiencing a victimization of crime, you'll be able to see what you can do for others and how you can connect them to resources to assist those individuals.
And that's tonight at 6:30 p.m. Again, just to say, at First Baptist Church in Hampton. Is there anything that people need to do to show up? Is it still open, or has that been full?
We're not quite full, but there is a limited selection of seats. The easiest way to get in contact with us to see if you still want to RSVP, at last check, we had about 20 seats left, is to use our contact information. Most likely Facebook is probably the easiest way. Hampton Victim Services Unit. Reach out to us just directly through there, and someone will respond, and we can see if we can get you on the list.
And I'll tag that as well on our Facebook stream and then also in our articles so that people can reach out or at least hear more about it. And Miss St. Clair, we spoke with her last, I think it was for Juneteenth last year. She did a play in Hampton that she was talking to us about. So I know that her work, is really profound and has really been years, right, in Hampton, of sort of her pairing with the community, especially for different events.
Absolutely. She was a godsend to us for coming and putting this production together. I think she exceeded all of our requests and any of our dreams as far as what she was able to accomplish.
And I'm sure it's going to be, an emotional night, but also an interesting night, to see the journey that takes place, throughout the show. All of this said, and you mentioned something that I want to jump back to, is you all have such a variety of resources. So I know it's going to be impossible for us to list all the work that you do. But one thing that you did mention is that there is various groups for support. I think there is one, and I spoke with it last year we spoke on it last year as well, at Wavy, is there are survivors groups. Is that correct, that you can be a part of?
That's correct. And so we have, I'm actually the coordinator for the Homicide Support Group in Hampton. So in Hampton, we have a Homicide Support Group. It meets twice a month on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. And again, the same contact information we can get you connected to that group for any individuals or any viewers who are watching this. And so it's for any next of kin of a homicide victim. So that can be an adult family member, a mother, a brother, a child, as long as they're a homicide victim. And they don't have to, the homicide did not have to happen in the city of Hampton. So the benefit of it is if you live in Hampton or you're close to Hampton, you can definitely come to our homicide support group if your schedule accommodates it. And then additionally, I would add that there are other localities, Newport News, and some of the other localities across the water that also have homicide support groups, and they are free and open to the public.
And that's a terrific resource because, finding therapy, but finding support and finding those groups. So I imagine some people don't know exactly where to reach out, or maybe don't want to be a burden on anyone, or maybe don't know exactly where to turn.
Definitely, I think as a coordinator of a homicide support group, I think it's a select group of people. I often tell people, the seeing is believing, but the reality of it is the participants in our homicide support group really make the group. They latch on to each other, they call each other, they text each other, they know the significant dates, and they reach out to each other and really keep each other connected. Um, and I think that is the glue and the selling point of a homicide support group. Some people come to talk, some people come to vent, some people come to listen, some people come to cry. But I always tell them the group is for you. We may facilitate and coordinate the group as a locality, but it's really participant and citizen led.
I mean, that's amazing to hear that it goes beyond the group meeting, right? That there is this community support there that might not just be at that date and time, where that meeting's taking place.
Definitely, because when you're in the thick of it, I don't think it's a 9 to 5 thing. So you really need people who can be there when you need them, and not just when it's a schedule or a time.
And, all this said, the team at the Victim Services Unit, I guess I'm assuming, and I think everyone, wishes there's more volunteers, there's more help, but your team is pretty small, that sort of makes all of this happen.
Yeah, we're a small bunch, but we're mighty. So we do handle all of any crime that happens in the city of Hampton. There's about 8 of us that would respond to it as far as the victim services side. But we're small but mighty. But we handle every type of crime. We're there for you, and we're available.
Exactly, and I don't say to diminish it, but raise it up, honestly, that, you all do a lot for the community in terms of, support the full year, offering all these resources and organizing, the resources, whether it's the court days, whether it's, the victim support groups. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of the other resources that people maybe are not as aware of, or just some that you're highlighting right now?
Sure. So I think one of the primary ones is just attending court meetings with victims and attorneys. I think the court process is definitely a challenge for people, especially if you're unacquainted to it. So unpacking some of the mystery, letting people know when court dates are, letting people know about their rights. There is actually a victim's rights bill of rights for the state, and many people are not familiar with that. So we do that. Outside of just providing information, we connect them to the resources. So every advocate is equipped to connect people with whether it's financial resources, transportation resources, referrals. Referrals is a big part. We partner with a number of agencies and try to assist people with connecting them to free counseling, because even though court process may be long, but even when the court process ends, we know that your injury or your wound may not be resolved by court, and so we try to connect you with counselors and therapists that can assist you with that and processing through your own pain.
And before we got started live, there was something interesting you said about why this Awareness Week is so important, and why knowing about these resources maybe ahead of time is so important. I don't want to lead you right into it, but you said something about people don't really understand maybe what the resources are, or know it until a crime actually happens, when they have to sort of reach out to you or find out more. Do you think it's helpful in these awareness weeks for people in the community to maybe know what support's offered before something might take place?
Definitely, and thank you for that. I think that victim services, one of the things I tell people is treat us like a fire extinguisher. You don't know you need a fire extinguisher until you need it. And so, with the resources and the information, we give out pamphlets, and we have brochures, and we have a library of information that's available to the public. But usually, because the community is so small, the information is available, but you don't know you need it until you need it. And so we try to get ahead of it. We don't want to. We know that for some cases we're only in a reactive stance, but we want to get ahead of things and let people know that there are resources and that there's help and there's hope for them. we hope that they don't have to use victim service, or they don't need to connect with the Commonwealth Attorney's office. But in the event that you do, we want you to know that there's information that can help you, that can help your family, that can help a loved one or someone you know.
And I think that's so powerful, the fire extinguisher analogy. And I think, that's something that people should feel in a lot of different ways, in these community resources that are available. I guess that brings me to, if you're a community member, maybe you are not involved directly, but what's the best way to support both maybe the victim services unit, but also those victims that maybe that are your neighbors, that are your friends?
I think being present is perhaps the most beneficial thing. I think for any of us, when you're meeting somebody at their most vulnerable or lowest space, having a support person, a person that has the presence of mind to answer the phone, to drive people to court, to sit in court with a person. I, I've been fortunate enough not to be in the same seats as some of the people I work with, but at the same time, I think when you're going through the court process and the phone calls start to fade and the days grow longer, having a person that can walk side by side with you. Again, we do that as advocates, but also just being a support person as an individual, as a friend or a family member is a big help, because the court seats are only so comfortable. You need somebody who's going to give you some support outside of that and be next to you, give you kind words and encouragement and motivation. And so I think those things, or just even being available to answer the phone, or just be present for a person, I think it's a big help. It goes a long way.
Well, Tyrone, I think that's great to hear, in terms of supporting. And I think one thing throughout this conversation that you wanted to give people is hope and also support. And I think that's great advice, for community members, friends, family, neighbors, in terms of how they can also help and walk with, their loved one, through these situations. Is there anything else that you just want to highlight this week in particular, or just want people to know going forward?
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our director, who's been doing this since 1984, so she's been in the thick of this for quite some time. She often challenges us and reminds us to continue to let people know about the resources that they have. We understand that the needs of crime victims can vary, but also we want to provide the same treatment and beneficial treatment to all victims of crime. So again, we serve all victims of crime, and letting people know that your Commonwealth cares. We're here for you, and there's resources for you, and we are a phone call away.
Well, Tyrone, thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you're joining us now, if you're joining us later, this will be available on Facebook, YouTube, and wavy.com with the link that will go directly to the resources that he's speaking about, the phone number to call, and more contact information. So please take a look there and find out more online at wavy.com. Tyrone, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.